ever done, probably, because I'm a motor mouth and I don't stop talking. So I'll make it quick. So yeah. Okay. So I'm talking about the XMLHttpRequest class, object, what have you, depending on how you're implementing it or looking at it. Anyhow, it's going to be an object because we're going to be instantiating a new XMLHttpRequest object, and we're going to be messing around with the methods and stuff inside there. You've heard of the term AJAX before, right? Do you know what it stands for? Okay. It stands for Asynchronous JavaScript and XML. I don't really know where XML plays into it. It must be something that's lower down inside everything, because obviously you see the XML HTTP request, that XML word is in there. Again, I don't know where in there XML fits in, but like I said, it's probably something low level that I'm not aware of, and I'm probably not supposed to be aware of it. Back in the day when this thing started existing in the first place, people probably had to code a lot of it by hand and everything, but now that it's such a popular way to do this type of communication between the client and the server, that people wrote a library and everything in there, the XML HTTP request, to abstract everything away and make it a lot easier. Because I showed you a bit of the code yesterday, and you saw how little you have to actually do to get it to work. So I'm sure when this was first starting, there was a lot more to do. Anyways, I'm not sure. Are you familiar with what AJAX does, though? Like, why would you use it and that type of thing? Okay. So, you know, every time that you go to a web page or something, so I'll go to Linux Society. Why not? Every time I want to see something else on my page, I have to click something, and you notice that the URL is changing at the top. I'm actually changing to a completely separate page every time I'm doing these things. I'm moving around. I'm moving to a different page. The URL is changing. Well, what if you want to stay on the exact same page but get new information from the server? So if I wanted to get new information from the server on this page, and I'm setting it up statically the way I have it, I'd have to actually send a completely new request and load a new page every single time I want to do that. AJAX is kind of a hacky way around that, because there's lots of other ways that you can talk between a server and keep a connection open. There's WebSockets that you've probably heard about. And there's a bunch of other ways. AJAX was one of the very first ways to do it, and like I said, it's kind of a hacky way around doing it. But basically what you're doing is you're sending these requests in the background without having to actually refresh your page. So when I was talking to you yesterday about, let's say, how is this useful? So you have a crew. Oh, actually, hopefully this one's okay too. So let's say you have a user login or a user sign up form. So you have a website, you have a user, a bunch of users can create accounts and whatnot. And this is, they're choosing a username right here, right? Now, let's say that you want to, kind of like on Gmail, when you're choosing a Google name for the first time, when you're doing that and you're typing out your username, every time you start typing, it says this username already exists. But the page is not reloading. It's just sending stuff by in the background. How that's happening is every single time you type a letter or finish typing a word or something, it's sending a new AJAX request to query the database to say, hey, do we have this username? Does this exist? Does this exist? And then it's sending back a, hey, this exists, or hey, this doesn't exist. And so it's updating a little message down here saying, the username already exists, pick something else, or that type of thing. It's using AJAX in the background to do a lot of that work. Gmail does the same thing. A lot of the, if you just keep your page open a lot of the time, you'll receive new emails and stuff. You'll notice your URL's not changing at the top, but you're able to go to different emails and stuff. Yeah. Gmail uses AJAX in the background. It's not using other things. It's using AJAX. And so, anyways, that's what AJAX is. Now let me show you how to implement it. Honestly, it's not a very hard concept to understand. It's just different.
So this is very good things that you can use for the one-page application.
That's exactly why you would use this thing, and that's one of the reasons why this is a preference on this in the class, or a focus. You'd have to. Right? I mean, you know, that's okay. I shouldn't say you have to, because there's a lot of things depending on what your page is doing. If you're having to query a server for information, then yes, you will have to use this if you want to keep it on one page. You could use WebSockets and a bunch of other things, but the problem is that almost every other sort of a method, I guess, to do this same sort of thing has a lot of, there's a lot of pros and cons. There's not a whole lot of cons to Ajax, really. The cool, I mean, WebSockets allows you to have bi-directional communication between the server and client equally. So the server could send something to the client, and the client could send something to the server, and even at the same time. Problem with WebSockets is it's not fully supported yet. It's not really ready for prime time. And so it's, yeah, it doesn't really, it won't work in every single case. Let me go to that website that I showed you yesterday that I made for my little demo. Ooh, I need to work. Well, it's just okay. I know what's going on. So I was looking at the CSS on the page, or like the image on the page. Cleared the images floating underneath everything, and I just realized I'm running at a very low resolution when I'm connecting to this projector, and I didn't scale the image. Anyhow, I built the page very quickly. But the most important part is when I click on this button, I'm consuming a web service using XMLHttpRequest. And the web service that I'm accessing is this one right here that I showed you yesterday, but I'll show it on here for Austin primarily. So when you go to this website, I mean, technically this can be considered a little API. When you go to this this website, this API endpoint, it's going to spit out a little JSON object at you. And it's actually, it's not really an object, it's a JSON string right now because it's on the page. But yeah, it's giving you what the current time is in a standard format. It's got the epoch in milliseconds for you, and it's got the actual date. So you can use JSON parse that I showed you a couple of weeks ago, roll through that string, actually turn it into a JSON object at that point, and then you could actually access the things in there and actually start using it. So if you were to use JSON parse to turn it into an object, you could actually grab the time element out, you can grab the milliseconds, since epoch element out, you can grab date out, you can do whatever you want with them.
If you refresh the page, it will change the number.
Yep, everything, each one of those items will change except for date because it's the same day. So that's exactly what I did on my page here, is I grabbed one of the elements out, and the element that I happened to grab out of the JSON object was the epoch here. And the reason for that, again, from when I was describing yesterday, I wanted to be able to format the time and the date in any way that I wanted. Yeah. So that was the only element inside that JSON string that I cared about. So I pulled out the epoch, and then I used the JavaScript, the date functions and everything to actually create a new date object that has a bunch of methods that allows me to spit out pieces that I want. So if I just want the hour, I'm able to pull out the hour with the get hours method. I'm able to pull minutes out with get minutes and so on and so forth. And I can format that in any way that I want. So let me actually look at the code really quick. And like I told you yesterday, most of the JavaScript you're seeing on this page is all formatting stuff. Let me just highlight the only important things that you need to see for the Ajax stuff. So the first thing is you need to create a new object, a new instance of XMLHttpRequest so you can actually use it. Because obviously XMLHttpRequest is it's a constructor. You need to make a copy of that so you can actually start messing with it, doing things with it, and storing stuff inside it. So that's the very first thing. And, I'm storing the instance of XMLHttpRequest inside a variable called Ajax because it's just easy to understand what's going on. Now, there is a property inside, well, you can set a property inside this XMLHttpRequest instance, or again, I'll just refer to it as my Ajax object here. There is a property that you can set inside there called onload that when you send a new request to the server using Ajax and you get a ready state of 4, meaning that everything was good, everything's finished loading, it's going to actually execute whatever function you store inside there. So when I send my request to the server using Ajax and it's completely finished processing and everything, then it's going to run that function that I stored inside onload. There's other little methods in there that you can set different functions for different states, like ready state changes and that type of thing. So let's say that you're loading a video or something, you just need to know, maybe you have a progress bar that's showing you if something's buffering or something. You could have that little progress bar as part of the function that every time the ready state changes to that it's processing data as opposed to being completely loaded. working. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm storing this function inside the onload property here. And like I said, 90% of this is all formatting pretty much. Basically what I'm doing is I'm grabbing the response. What's going to happen is when the onload event happens, there's going to be properties and stuff that are attached to this object. That this keyword that you see there, I'm going to start being able to access the different properties that are inside every property called response text, which is actually going to be whatever the server responded back with. So if I requested a web page, it's going to be filled with XML. I'm not XML, HTML. Jeez, I'm tired. In this case, though, because that web page gives me a JSON string, the response text is actually going to be the JSON string that I can actually then parse into using JSON.parse and then later manipulate. So let me actually go down to the rest of the AJAX stuff. So first part, instantiate a new object. Second part, actually do something with your stuff once it loads. Third step is you need to create, you need to open the connection basically. You need to say to the object, you need to set it up, say, hey, I want this to be a GET request. By the way, you can use all of the other types of HTTP requests. You can use POST, put, whatever. I mean, whatever exists, that's what that first parameter is. 99% of the time, you're probably just going to be using a standard GET to just check on something. But if you're sending something up to the server to then check on something, you might send a POST. So in that example where I was talking about checking for the username, you might send the username of whatever the username currently is for the server to check and then send back. So the first parameter in the open is the HTTP request type. The second is the actual the server address, so where you're actually wanting to send to the URL. And then the third argument there is, do you want to send this synchronous? Do you want this to work synchronously or asynchronously? So true means I want this to run asynchronously, meaning that it's not going to block your code while it's waiting to do something. Okay. So for example, when this is running and it's not, if it's not loaded yet, it's not going to completely block all of the rest of the JavaScript running on your page. It's going to run it asynchronously in the background saying, hey, I'm going to work on it, and I'll let you know when I've got it. And once I finally got it, I'm going to fire the onload function. If you set it to false, it's going to run synchronously, meaning that every other bit of JavaScript code that's underneath where I do the AJAX send thing, it's going to hang. It's going to just sit there until you finally get your onload and everything finishes there, and then it can process the rest. That's not the way you want to run your pages, because if you're consuming an online resource that takes a little while to do something, you don't want the rest of your page to be not functional while you're waiting for that. So just always use true there unless you have a specific reason to go synchronous with it. Then the very last thing you have to do is, now that you've already set up the open connection, everything, you actually need to send it now. Because the open method is just setting everything up, getting all the information into the AJAX object so that it knows what to do with everything. Then send actually executes it and sends it out to the server. And like I said, with that asynchronous parameter we set there to true, it's not going to block everything. That's it. I mean, do you have any questions? I mean, I actually made that way more verbose than I needed to, but yeah, that's pretty much the gist of it. Do you have any questions?
Oh,
Yeah, there's really.
That's pretty simple.
Oh, it's dead simple. That's why it's.
What was the first argument in AJAX open?
The first object, the first argument, first argument there is the HTTP request type. So get, post, put, all different HTTP request types.
What can you do with those other types?
Well, with put, it's kind of like you can push something up to the server, kind of like like a file or information. It's like a FTP sort of thing. Actually, let me open up a page of all the different HTTP request types, because there's I might as well do it on the video.
It's always good when someone teaches.
Oh yeah. So yeah, there's a few in here, actually a couple in here I didn't even know about. I didn't know about the options one. Yeah, I'm not really sure what that's about. But you standard get, this is what you're almost always doing in your web browser is you're getting stuff.
Yeah.
Head is apparently identical to get, except the server doesn't necessarily need to return a message body in the response. Okay, interesting. Post, that's one that you're familiar with because almost every time, I mean, when you send form data through, you're using a post.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. You can use put. Yeah, it's, I mean, that's kind of a FTP style sort of thing, pushing something up. The fundamental, here on the page, the fundamental difference between post and put is reflected in the different meaning of the request URI. So, yeah, so you basically look a little bit more into that, but delete is another one. Yeah, honestly, most of the time you're pretty much going to be messing with post and get.
Yeah.
But there are other HTTP request types that can do other things. It's just very rarely are you going to come across a situation where you need to use any of those other ones. I personally haven't ever needed to use anything else besides get and post. Oh yeah, yeah. I created a in project management. I'm not. No, yeah. I'm sorry. That's the right class. I created a pizza rating website for a project, and I was using Ajax to update and refresh the little counter meter. So everybody was voting in the class live, and like we actually did a live demonstration, and we brought in pizza, and everybody would eat the pizza and everything, and then they would rate on the website what they thought of different parts, like how good it tastes and all the different things. And then everybody's page should have had a little meter that would automatically update based on everybody doing that type of thing. I just had it sending Ajax requests at a regular interval, like every certain amount of seconds or something. It would send a new thing in. Now, I could have done that in a more efficient way. Maybe every time something changes on the server, maybe it triggers something. So, but yeah, I had it working. I didn't know what I was doing when I set it up originally, so it broke a little bit. I think I understand the process a little bit better now. I think the problem with the reason why it broke is on the server side of how it was handling. Anyways, that's not really of any consequence here. Yeah, so pretty straightforward.